Okay.
Could be wrong, but
Yeah.
I'm going to call the Tipp City Exempted Village Schools Board of Education meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Spots, call attendance, please.
Amber Drum here. Mrs. Dunaway is absent at the moment. Rick Maines,
Here.
Simon Patry,
Here.
and Zakor here. Okay, we do have a quorum and we can begin the meeting.
First item is now 1C, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I move.
Motion by Mrs. Zakor, seconded by Mrs. Drum. Mrs. Zakor, any discussion?
No, I think so.
Mrs. Drum?
No, not at the moment.
I would move. Well, I guess I have a question before I make any motion, but the Stagecrafters, item 5D, when we tabled it at the last meeting, it was actually tabled for the regular meeting because I had asked that question as a clarification from, and the clarification provided late to the motion was that not the next work session, but next regular meeting. And I may have missed it in the agenda review or may have been added after that review. And so before I make a motion related to it, I just want to make sure that there wasn't a reason we need to do it today because we don't have Mrs. Dunaway here and I'd like everybody to be able to talk about it.
I think some of this information was added afterwards. Mrs. Dunaway should be here at the end of the meeting as well.
Okay, so then maybe I'll just withhold any motion related to it. And then if the board members feel.
I think we'll have a consensus on what the issue was on hours at the end, that it should be very quick to get done.
That answers that question. I have no other discussion or questions. Mr. Maines?
I have no questions.
All right, Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Zakor,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Maines,
Yes.
Patry.
Yes, motion passes. Agenda is approved. Next item is item 2A, library tax budget presentation. We have a guest, Miss Lisa Santucci from the Tipp City Library, who's going to be speaking to us today about the library tax budget. Welcome, Ms. Santucci, and thank you for coming.
Good evening and thank you. On behalf of the Library Board of Trustees and myself, I'm here to do our procedural presentation of our annual work budget, which is our 2024 tax budget that we present to the school board before it goes to the county. There's nothing too different here. There's nothing really new and changed at this point. If there's any questions about the tax budget. I also wanted just to say a couple of things just briefly about the library. The staff of the public library enjoy our collaborative working relationship that we have with our marvelous teachers in our district, from projects such as the DLPP author series. Saw Mr. Orange just come in here. To this year, we had the entire freshman class, it was 106 kids, or maybe 116, all visit the library 4 times, also obtain their library cards. And we assist in the summer academy and various other things. The library is also currently preparing for its 100th birthday. The library has been in existence at its location for 100 years. I have an invitation that I will give to Mr. Moran to invite you all to our annual, our centennial celebration. And if at that time you don't have a library card, you could obtain one if you're new to the area. So, and the other thing that we're working on that our tax budget is important about is our levy. The library will have a levy. We are currently working on that, and that will be in November.
Let's say what type of levy is it?
Yeah.
It is just a renewal.
Real levy.
This is just a renewal. Nothing is changing right now. This is our every 5 years. It's a straight renewal. Are there any questions about? I know this is, I think, your first reading, and then this will come back another time.
Any questions of the board?
I have one.
Mhm.
Mrs. Santu, yeah.
Yep.
Is there anything remarkable about these numbers? I mean, I didn't really have to be
No,
honest with you.
there isn't. This is just a very top level. This,
Okay.
if you're looking, nothing is blown out. You're not seeing anything. I mean, our largest part of our budget really is our salary.
Mhm.
And then really our revenue and what we make is from what's called the public library fund that we get from the state, and then we get a small portion of revenue from our levy. And that's how we exist. Those are our two main sources of income.
And are you seeing any trending one way or the other that like encourages you or concerns you in terms of like property tax and things of that nature? That we're
Not with taxes, no.
Where-
There's a lot of other things that concern me, and I'm very concerned about, intellectual freedom and different things with content in libraries and.
No, I
things that are
mean,
happening.
in terms of the financials of the state.
No, we feel very confident of where we are. We are very fortunate in the state of Ohio. I'm not from Ohio, but the way that Ohio has structured its funding for public libraries is incredibly strong, enough so that other states study us.
Oh, okay.
We really do, because of the general sales tax, what's called the PLF. We get a portion, a very small portion, to supply an income so public libraries can exist. Ohio is the third state in the country that reads the most ebooks.
Wow.
New York, California, and Ohio. Who would have known?
Yeah.
But it's because of the public library strength in number, how many we have and how we are funded.
That's interesting.
And the collaboration within the libraries.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. The consortium levels are very strong. I mean, we wield a lot of power when you're going to tell a company like, I come from an academic background, but when you're telling a company like LexisNexis and things like that, that we have 200 people that'll work with you instead of one, you can get a better deal. We're very collaborative in that regard. Awesome.
Okay.
Anything else? Anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank
Tanti.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too.
You too.
Thank you.
Next item is 3A, property tax information.
Okay, I have attached some items here. Actually, this afternoon, I thought I'd attach some additional info just for your information on top of just the spreadsheet with the general taxes. Because we also not only get the revenue accounts for the taxes, but get the rollback in the homestead. So I wanted to go ahead and attach that information so you could view that. If you look at the revenue account for the taxes there. I did put the last 3 years in addition to the present fiscal year. So it has the total, and this across the board, there's general fund taxes. You can see the difference over the years there, and then the change, the last column, I just did the change from the prior year, so you have an idea. But going back 3 years, there's definitely an increase. The bond, then you'll see that amount changes as the bond amount that we owe goes down. The taxable amount also goes down. So on those two lines, there's a decrease. We'll see that. Then I've got the permanent improvement taxes have increased, as well as the emergency levy taxes have increased. And then I totaled them, across the years there just to get a comparison. The one document I attached that has our assessed value ties into why the taxes have gone up on our last update for the assessed values under the valuation. You can see where the value has increased. I attached this year's for 22 and last year's for 21.
I'm sorry, I missed the document you're referring to now. Which one are you referring to?
Valuations for TCEBS is listed there. That's from my county board there. So the total, and so the amount, especially at our emergency levy or any of the increases come under the residential real property. Did you find the attachment?
Yeah, I did.
And comparing those, it would probably be better to have them side by side on the screen. However, the residential property is where a significant portion of the increased valuation lies. And that would be the amount that has given us the increase in revenues. That second line there. For 22, the 464,764,000 versus the prior 366,827,000. That's where the significant increases are in the district, which is netting the increased revenue for this year. The other document I attached was the rollbacks and homestead. Those amounts come from Ohio Department of Education. So through the district, we get that extra amount. Rollbacks have definitely increased over the years. I noticed that. However, the homestead has actually declined. So I was interested to see that. And those are pretty much the, for those 65 and older that own their homes that qualify for the homestead exemption. So I wanted to at least show you the difference because those are forms of taxes. Together, the 105,904 wasn't as good as what I was hoping, but the rollbacks definitely have an increase this year. So. The last document, I just wanted to show you the effective rates. And it's something that we get each year from the county. Shows our prior levy activity, which I thought was interesting. You can see the prior millage rates that were approved and then the current effective rate. So I know we're looking at renewing our levies on the emergency levies. And those mills there do adjust, even though we bring in the same amount for both levies, the effective rates are a little bit different. As the valuation improves, the millage rate somewhat goes down, which will be part of the ballot language, you know, when we do place that on the levy this year. The millage rate will be lower than what it was at one point. So I want to look at May 2nd, 2017. You'll see at the bottom the levy history on that document. The emergency levy, 13.9 mills. And then the second one, November 2019, 4.5 mills. But when you go up to the top, you'll see they're actually bringing in lower millage currently due to the higher valuation of the district. Even though it actually brings in the same amount of revenue for us, the millage rate is lower, which that'll ultimately help when we have our total debt capacity for the bond. When we do get our building project finalized, those numbers will affect the total debt capacity we can take on, you know, something or bond. But I know there are several documents there, and I just want to make sure you were able to see them and the improvement of the revenues. And then see if I could answer any questions about the revenues for this year.
Questions, comments from the board? Mr. Moran, did you have anything? Mr. Stefanik? Thank you, Mrs. Fox. I'm sorry, Mr. Stefanik, I saw you walk.
I didn't see him back there.
I'm just going up.
Yeah, what are you doing over there? He told me he was gonna be cold. What's he doing over
Mr. Stefanik and senior night, yes.
there?
And so he was
Snuck in.
braving the cold weather and came in a little, that's the reason for his appearance. That's
So Ryan's what you guys doing?
Not the greatest baseball, softball weather tonight. A lot of warming up going on.
I just want to say one last thing. I was just glad to see that 1 million extra dollars in the revenue. And when we update the finalize the forecast, we'll see that all the revenues, updated. And be able to see how that offsets some of that deficit we have over the 5 years. So. Just want to make that comment too.
Thank you. Next item is 3B OFCC update. Mr. Stefanik? I'm not sure. Well, Mr. Moran, Mr. Stefanik, Mr. Moran?
We'll kind of share it. I'll let Aaron's in the chair for reporting, so I'll let him start reporting and I'll fill in after that.
We had our executive meeting last week, and then on Friday, we had our OFCC meeting with a couple representatives from OFCC, a couple Garvin Miller representatives, and then Mark and myself as well. And we really talking about what are the options that OFCC will really allow. We went over the projected enrollment that we got from their company that does those. Again, they're looking for a small increase in overall in the 10 years, a couple hundred over the next 10 years. Again, it's an estimate. It's what they use to guide enrollment. And we're about 25 to 2,700 really is kind of where that's at. So we talked about the space issue because they're looking at 1,000 kids per building is kind of what they're optimally looking for. When you add the high school in there, that has a capacity of 1,200 kids, that takes out. So now you have essentially 1,500 kids that they are looking at. And they're saying, well, it's probably a 2-building project. They are entertaining three buildings. They're looking up and will be mocking up information on, okay, if you want to do 3 buildings, that's fine. This is kind of what we'll contribute. They'll probably give us a flat dollar amount versus if we build what their recommendation is probably going to be that percentage amount for that. So once they get those numbers to us, then we'll share that with everybody. But obviously in their mind, more buildings equals more money. So we have to, obviously be cognizant of that and aware on how we proceed, what we're looking at, and be obviously make sure we're focusing on what our kids need, but also what financially responsible for our community as well. And then today, Kim, they were looking at space availability in the district just to see about what space do we have currently in order to maybe mitigate some of our costs going forward, even right now with some of the repairs and the shape of the buildings. What options are there? So they're looking at that right now. We should get a report in the next 2 weeks. And we'll have another meeting, probably a special meeting before that, once they say, hey, here's all the information with stuff. What questions are Mark or Karen, what I missed?
They just put a timeline on the estimates and mock-ups for a 2-building district and a 3-building district. They said that they might be able to get that to us inside of 2 weeks. So this coming Friday would be the first week, and so middle of the end of next week, maybe we could have some numbers.
When you mentioned the 1,500 students in the 2 building, Or are you talking about 2 new buildings plus the high school, or 2 buildings including the high school?
2 buildings, including the high school,
Oh, wow.
because the high school has a capacity of 1,200.
Okay.
And then just for the board's information, 1,500, you know, I was a former elementary principal and a middle school principal. 1,500 sounds like a big building, and it is. But what they can do is they can actually create almost like a wing setup in the buildings. And so what we have now, we have Nevin Kopic, Broadway, and LT Ball. And so if the district likes the design, you could have possibly a wing that is what Nevin Kopic is now. You could have a wing that is what Broadway is right now, or you could have a wing that's what LT is right now. And they can figure that out so that there are separate entrances, possibly even separate drop-off points for our parents. You have the same basic route for the buses, but you might have separate places for the parents, and all that goes into the configuration. So it's not just 1,500 students all going in the same door, you know, at the same time. You know, that you can work with schedules and everything to make it not seem like that big of a building.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board? This is a.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. Well, I have a question. So when you're saying this, what was it, 1,500 or the number at the high school? So is that if that's what's available right now, if we put more people over there? I want to make sure I understand that.
They're saying the capacity at the high school is 50 or 1,200 students, correct?
Okay,
Correct.
that we could add that much over there.
Yes, the way they break down the square footage and the way they break down the classroom spaces,
Okay.
there's an eligible space for 1,200, and we have just under 8 now. Just under 8. So in the calculator's mind, there are 400 spaces at the high school available, whether that's realistic or not, but they believe that there's space for 400.
Okay. So, yeah, I know, then I'm trying to do calculations if I'm 7th and 8th grade, like I'm going through all that in my head right now, because I know what some of those numbers are. Okay, I just was curious about that.
7th and 8th is just under, wait a minute, 7th and 8th may be just about 400.
Okay.
Yeah. 6th, 7th, and 8th would be just under 600, but 7th and 8th might be right at about 400.
That's what I was, okay.
And that's not taking into consideration like the cafeteria size. They're not
Right.
taking to get the, you know, you have 1 gym right now. Do you need 2 to art
Right.
classes? All those things. need
And
to
then
be
I guess I have a
considered.
question too. So when they come up with those numbers, are they basing it off our community growth that we've seen over time? Or is it just a basic calendar, like a basic number idea?
They use birth rates, they use
Formulas.
residential property area, they have a algorithm or
Yes.
different. When you look at the report, it says, well, they expect flat growth in this area of the village or the city and potential growth of, 2% over here. They have it color coded. There's an algorithm or a formula they use to figure this stuff out.
Okay,
And they look at, things, developments that have been approved and things like that from the
That are coming
past
in.
and that are coming up.
okay,
Potentially coming up. Yes.
okay. I just was curious because I feel like we've grown significantly. So I was just curious what those numbers would look like. Okay.
We can share that with the board.
Well,
I think we shared it already. but we can
I
share
was
it.
gonna say, it was shared with us.
Yes,
Maybe
yes,
if you
but
can
I-
go back and.
Yes, I just.
I know, we get a lot.
If you don't have it, let me know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
well, I
I'm
didn't
sure
forget,
too.
what was that shared under? How did that look like? What was that?
Probably PDF.
A projected enrollment
Yeah.
report or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember getting it, but I just.
Yeah.
I'd still like to ask a question.
Right,
Not everybody gets those papers.
Right, and Mr. Core referenced
future
the
thing.
last one.
Yes.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
referenced the last 10-year projection and said that they had estimated about 100, growth over that 10 years. And now this projection is estimating 200.
5 years
growth.
later, the same company.
Right,
So it just goes to show you these numbers are not concrete.
That was what
They're very
my,
fluid.
that was what my point was.
Yes.
That's where I was going with it.
right.
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And the same thing with their calculations, they're honest about it. At OFCC, they know that there's a difference between a math problem and then when you add actual students and staff and traffic and buses into that equation, they understand that it may not
Right.
the same. Right, so that's where Garmin Miller comes in when they do these space and efficiency studies. They can put real world, mental pictures, to OFCC, and then they said that we will have a not negotiating, but almost like a presentation to OFCC, so they can get, this is our community and this is our expectation, and here's how we'd like to move forward. And then they take that information into consideration before they finalize their what they call their master plan. And then we look at whether or not we do it exactly the way that it is in their master plan, or we put some locally funded initiatives in it, and then we modify it a little bit.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, the high school, the numbers. I know I read the report, because I was like, wow, because at first, when we talked about the high school being overbuilt, I was under the impression from somewhere that it was the hallway width that contributed to this bigger number of square footage. But then this report that was sent to us talked about the number of rooms that are not filled at capacity. Do you guys remember this, Kim? And yeah, and so it was that kind of like, I was really surprised about that. There's a certain, what's the capacity percentage they want those rooms filled at? X, like 5 periods at 6 periods a day. What was it, like 75%? Full.
Because I did, you have 8 bells, right? And I think the report I saw was that the way Garmin Miller did it.
Yes.
Is that I think they did it off of 7 bells out of 8.
And so it looked from that report, what I remember is that it's whatever it is, whatever the calculations they're using, it made it look like that building is very underutilized. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm just saying that's what I was reading that. I was like, wow, I would have never guessed that. So I just want to bring up that point, that underutilization is now beginning to look like actual classrooms rather than just big wide hallway spaces that were maybe overly wide, because that was kind of the message a few years back. And so I think that that's a key distinction for whichever way you want to go on the argument, but that is new information that I saw, that these actual classrooms at the high school are, by that formula, underutilized. The second thing I want to say that I've always found interesting in this discussion with OFCC and our district about buildings, number of buildings. Well, you're referring in the strict sense of academic buildings.
Yes.
And so I think that distinction needs to be made, because a district is not just academic buildings. Then you got the bus garage, then you got the board office, then you've got these other things. So I feel like we're being a little bit too general in our talking about how many buildings. I think that the public really needs to have a more realistic understanding of what buildings go into a district and what we're talking about. And I guess the OFCC, because this is one thing I didn't really cover with them a few years back, they don't really look at the bus building or the maintenance or the board build. All they care about is the classroom buildings. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. So I just would hope that whatever happens in the future, we sort of weave into those conversations the other buildings that are being paid by tax dollars. And so we just can't like put a little mask on and say, oh, well, we fixed the academics, now we're looking really good. And so that's just my view.
The master plan needs to take into consideration everything.
I think so.
Correct.
I think so. And the public needs to have a greater awareness of everything. And then they can make their final choice at the ballot box, but at least let them know what everything is. Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Court.
Sure.
Mr. Mays?
I would only add to that I think that's true. But from what I've seen too, I think Garmin Miller has done a very good job in their planning what we're looking at in the future, the things that they are going to point out. They're very detail oriented, and I think they're looking at everything altogether. They've done a good job so far. I've been to a few of the meetings, and then we have several scheduled coming up, and they're going to be open to the public. So they're doing a very nice job. I'm looking forward to their presentations.
Well, if I may, I don't want it to be a thought that I'm in any way criticizing, that my comments have nothing to do with Garmin Miller. I'm just saying that
Yeah,
in the big picture of our discussions as a district, and I'm sure Garmin, I think Garmin Miller will help weave in those other factors
Right,
when
I think they
when we look at our total picture.
mhm.
That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Maines. Thank you, Mrs. Zakor. So I've got a few questions, but I think in case the public's watching this meeting to understand what's going on, we are currently pursuing the expedited, I think, the local program or something like that, or local partnership program, expedited help. Like EU, 2 L's and a P, I think.
ELPP.
Yeah, well, thank you. There's 2 letters in this. OFCC is the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, and essentially what they do is the state of Ohio will help fund part of our facilities needs, whether it's construction, renovation, remodeling, et cetera. And we're all assigned kind of a number based on the wealth of the district, the needs of the district, and everything else. And there's different programs to go under. The UP program is kind of allows schools that have a need that aren't necessarily up on their number, which would be under CFAP, to go quicker. And then what they do, if you go into the UP program, the school district essentially has to pass a bond for the entire cost of the project. And then under the UP program, the state of Ohio comes in and then says, we'll approve this master plan and we'll pay this percentage. And then when you come up for your CFAP number, then that all gets reevaluated and they true up those numbers. And so you've had to spend the money that you said you're going to spend on what you're going to spend it. And then 2, if their projections are off or things like that, or then they can give you additional money. Is that pretty, correct me, any misstatement on that, is that pretty accurate? And so the one question I have related to that, kind of like when you get up to the CFAP and then they change your numbers, if we pursued a 3-building program, Aaron, Mr. Moran, rather, you said that we have the percentage under the 2, probably, if they say 2 building but we want to go 3, they might do that, but it would be a flat dollar amount. Does that preclude the ability that when we do come up to like our CFAP number, that we would be able to get additional funds if they weren't correct on some of their presumptions? Do we know?
We didn't get into weeds with that, but they just talked about having a flat contribution versus the percentage.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's adjustments that can be made if things that we didn't get that far into it.
Okay. And then on the utilization of the classrooms and students, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is when you look at those projections, Mrs. Zakor was correct, classroom utilization. It's not that we have classrooms that are empty, it's that we have classrooms that are empty maybe for 1 or 2 periods or bells per day. And what the state of Ohio wants to see is we've got teachers coming in and out of classrooms so that they're never empty, essentially, or at least as minimal as possible. And based on that, it's like, well, if you have these teachers running around, then you don't have these empty rooms, you can shove as many kids as you can in there. And so, that's the reality, in my opinion. And then, so when we talk about we overbuilt the high school, because some things I have heard from people and things like that, what I'd like the public to know and to consider is that there's a difference between what the state of Ohio feels needs to occur and what we as a school district think is important to our district and our community's educational expectations. Tipp prides itself as having one of the best school districts in the state of Ohio. And, part of that is that we do place the needs of the students first. And so when we're looking at that, and there's narratives related to we overbuilt the high school, we're not used in classrooms, just keep in mind that the way they look at that is not necessarily based on we've got empty classrooms just sitting there with nothing in there but some boxes. Every classroom's got something. It's just they expect teachers to be running around, not have any, stuff established. And think about the impact on the kids when the teachers don't have their stuff there, they don't have a setting. It's got to be more generic than, because it's serving several different disciplines or areas of study, subject matters, whatever you want to call it. I think that we as a community need to figure out what it is we want. Do we want to place an emphasis on education and say that we're the best school district and provide that best environment, and which may require a locally initiated fund? Or do we say, well, we're going to save money as much as we can and potentially at the expense of the quality of education? And so, I just want to make sure that that's kind of understood. And that's just one example of what they throw in. I think this is a course point related to academic buildings is excellent. We have a lot of needs related to those. We really need to think about, helping out with the stadium if possible, engage the community's feelings on that. We have a bunch of buildings that need to be kind of looked at. The other thing the community needs to understand, I think, is that when the OFCC is looking at whether we should build new buildings or remodel, they look at these buildings and they say, the cost to bring this up to today's educational standards is going to be this much money. And they call that like a percentage. And a lot of our buildings, based on the OFCC's evaluation of those buildings, it would cost more than 100%. I think at least two of them are close to 100%. I think
It's
for
close
three,
to 100.
Yeah.
I think one was 102, one was like 100. Then they go up and down every year depending. But they're all, three buildings are hovering at or around 100 or above it. And those buildings are Nevin Coppic, Broadway, and
Middle school.
middle school. The middle school is not that much higher, but it's not at the 100, but it's like 90s and the 90%.
And then a partial renovation.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's following a partial renovation.
Yeah.
And so I know that's going to be very frustrating to taxpayers that we had a partial renovation. But at the end of the day, we can look back over the spilled milk and make bad decisions again, or we can decide what we want to do. And so just keep all those things in mind, and the community, go to these meetings and let us know what you think, because we as a board want that feedback so we can gauge kind of where we go. The master plan then, we'll include all those things. I think Garmin Miller is looking at those student projections. Have they completed that look at? Do they think they're close to accurate?
They're satisfied with it.
They're satisfied with the report?
Yeah, they sent me an email, told me that they would endorse me signing off on it.
Yeah. And I think this is a course point. Me being aware of all those details is very important. And I think Garmin Miller, like Mr. Maines and Mrs. Acorsa, will do a good job of communicating that. But we need the community's feedback. And I think it's important that we forget everything we've ever heard of why things are what they are, or overbuilt high schools because the hallways or, classrooms are not being used without the context and detail. And so please come to the meetings, please read what's going to be put out there, because you all need to be informed. Because the reality is LT Ball and Nevin Coppic in the middle school are in bad shape. Some of these buildings, Broadway,
Yeah.
thank you. Broadway, Nevin Coppic, and the middle school, but specifically Broadway and LT Ball, or geez Louise,
Nevin.
Broadway, Nevin Coppic. They have significant safety risks that could create a risk to our children, our teachers, and staff at any time. And we're on top of it, and we're trying to do our best to keep and mitigate against that, but that's a risk that exists. And so I highly encourage that the community understands that and gets informed. Go ahead, Mrs. Sequoia.
Yeah, those of us, whether you're on this board or not, or whatever your position is in the community, that have been really following a lot of the literature, the data, the OFCC information. It's complex, and there's a lot of balls thrown up in the air here. You have to struggle. It's a lot of diverse opinions. I think we're way past this conversation of need. Back in 2015, when they wanted the K3 over at Broadway, we had to convince the public, oh, the building needs to be, we're way beyond that. I don't think there's anybody in this community who says, oh, I think that building's perfect the way it is. Even the ones that want to preserve it are like, there's some serious crap happening over there. It needs to get fixed. And so we're past that need of convincing you it's bad. Now the question is the solution. And so I think that the more we talk about all the components, it is confusing to people who have a job and are busy and doing this and that, and they hear snippets, and then these rumors get started and people just get confused, they get angry, they get apathetic. And so it's incumbent upon us, in my opinion, all of us, whether you're, whatever your position employed in this district, to understand the dynamics and to keep feeding accurate information, not necessarily your plan, your goal, but accurate information. Because I have faith when people understand accurate information, they tend to make the best decisions. For example, this is a new piece that came up on the future thing, the map that we all got. I'm just going to show you real quick. I think you know this. Mrs. Hagan probably knows what I'm talking about. Ooh. Okay, so anyway, it has that. Mr. Moran, remember this? Okay, so when you look at that, I thought it was very telling. It is a piece, just another information piece that shows the growth of ages 5 through 18 is happening on the west side of 25A. We just so happen to have a property over there in 25A. I am not advocating one plan or another. I think this is my last year. I have not taken I just want the best. Okay. I want the best for whatever it's going to be. But I'm not rooted in anything. I'm not trying to sell that property over there. I'm simply saying this is another additional piece to consider. Ages 5 through 18, the biggest growth is west of 25A. And so then you start thinking about buses and gasoline and back and forth. And time, and these kids right now, the poor children here. One thing I've always kind of had frustration with, as small as our town is, some of these kids get up at 6, get on these buses an hour before their school starts, and I'm thinking, what the heck? Our little town, and they have to sit on a bus for an hour at 6:40, 6:30 before they even get to their first period. Come on, I understand we're trying to maximize dollars with our bus schedules and our bus runs, but maybe if we do a better job in putting facilities, with less back and forth and this and that, we can help cut down some of that time for those kids to sit on that bus. I would be pretty cranky if I got to school by 7:30 and I've already been bouncing around on a bus for an hour, and I got to go to my first period. So I'm just saying, I don't know. We got two important people here from the high school. They want to wait. I just feel that I felt bad for my children when they had to get up and sit on that bus. No wonder they don't like to ride the bus. So anyway, just putting it all together, it's complex. You look at growth patterns and this and that. And so I'm glad I'm not on the committee. I mean, I'm glad I'm not on it, but thank you for those that are working hard to try to come up with the best plan. But yeah, we just really need to feed a lot of accurate information because there's a lot of moving parts in this decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cora. I just want to say one thing too, and I know you didn't take a position, so I'm not saying this, but when we look at all the data, it's important that we also consider what the implication is. Just because there's growth in a certain area doesn't mean that's where the core amount of our students are. And so, yeah, there may be growth there and may continue to grow, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be more efficient or better for our students to have things at Michael's Road. Just if the core majority of our students are on the east side of the highway, the money you save busing the west side to that school, you're going to lose with the east side going over, for example, or if you have a property like Michael's Road that doesn't have any developed infrastructure beneath from what's that road? 25A? It's on Michael's Road. No, but the one,
Peters.
no,
Peters is on this side. and-
no, so. I think it's 25A. So we've got, yes, there's some utilities that go through 25A, but you still got to bring it up to Michael's Road. You still got to go to Michael's Road and look at what the geological makeup of it is. Is it all limestone in there? Does it have to be blown out? We got to do core samples. There's a lot of things to that. There's going to be a lot of cost efficiencies related to the pre-existing locations at the Hyatt sites, including as it relates to like temporary platforms and efficiencies and things of that nature. So I'm not saying that that's the position we should take. What I'm saying is that we have to wait until we have a total picture of everything before we start saying no to Michael's Road, or yes to Michael's Road, or yes to Hyatt, no to Hyatt, or no to having a Broadway site, or yes to having a Broadway site. And the other thing too is that I know there's a lot of people that are very tied to the architectural history and the buildings and their locations. I understand that. But at the end of the day, we've got to look at the entire community and putting the kids first. Even if you renovate those Broadway buildings to the best standards, they're not set up for today's educational requirements. We have mandates imposed upon us by the federal government to satisfy 504 plans, IEPs that require swing spaces and things like that. You can remodel those buildings, but you're not going to fix that problem. So when you're looking at cost of construction, what makes sense is something that should all be thought about. Anyone else?
No, I was gonna agree with you. I think there's just a lot of things to consider in all of it. So just keep open mind.
Yeah.
Open.
Yes. Mr. Moran, Mr. Spock, Mrs. Core, Mrs. Fox. Next item is executive session.
Are you gonna move it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Recommend action is to adjourn the executive session for purposes authorized in the Board of Education Policy 0166 and Ohio Vice Code 121.22 G1. G1 to consider the appointment, employment dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of public employee or official, or the investigation of charges, complaints against the public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual, unless the public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual requests a public hearing. Potential invitees include but not limited to Mr. Barnes, Mr. Moran, Dr. Tuttle Huff, and the Board of Education's attorneys. I would also add a potential invitee to be Mr. Stefanik. And so I will make a motion to amend 4B or 4A rather, to add a potential invitee of Mr. Stefanik. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Accord. Any discussion related to the amendment of item 4A? All right, Mrs. Fox, the present motion before the board is to amend the agenda to add a potential invitee, Mr. Stefanik, to item 4A. Please call the vote.
Patrick,
Yes.
Zakor,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Yes.
Mames. I got the drum. I got them out of order. I'm sorry. Mames. I called everybody, right?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
You did.
Because I'm thinking Teresa's here. She's not here. Okay, good.
The item is amended. And so just to bring us back to where we were, list of potential invitees may include but not limited to Mr. Barnes, Mr. Moran, Dr. Throff, Mr. Stefanik, and the boards of education's attorneys. Is there a motion?
I move.
Motion by Mrs. Drum. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
Mrs. Akor beat you out, Mr. Reigns.
It's fine.
Any discussion? Right, Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Drum,
Yes.
Mains,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes,
Zakor. Yes.
motion passes. We are now adjourned to executive session. Time is 5:50 PM.
Why am I on there?
I don't know, but you're bigger than life, bigger than life, Melanie.
Jeepers.
That's, well, that's your, I think it's playing off of your computer.
Yeah.
That's your camera.
Yeah,
It's like there's all of Melanie.
You gotta click the right camera. It's probably it's either the Mevo or the,
I don't like that one so close.
no, that's the other one.
It's usually called
Is
Logic
your husband
Cam.
picking it up? Are
Is
you
it
still
plugged
not
in?
driving?
I'll do it with you.
Yeah, then you can put me in. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we'll see that.
Is it maybe at
You're so
maybe at the back of the end of the?
Okay, so it's not Logic.
Try it.
I like the,
This wasn't really-
We'll
Try
do
it.
that.
Oh,
I know.
That's a good sound.
No, that is the sound, so that's, oh.
That was the sound.
That's the pre or the post, one of the storms, the tornado warning.
From you, and are we ready to go?
It's fuzzy on the ends.
All right, well, thanks for bearing with us. If you saw the technical difficulties, if not. We are now returning to regular session and adjourning from executive session. The time is 8:06 p.m. The next item on the agenda is item 5A, administrative staff for 2023. Recommended action is motion for approval of the following administrative staff for the 2023-2024 school year. Is there a motion? I will make the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Maines.
Okay.
Mr. Maines, any discussion?
No.
Any other board members, any discussion? All right, Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Petrie,
Yes.
Means,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Dunaway,
Abstain.
Secor.
Yes,
Motion passes. Next item is 5B. Administrative contract amendment. Recommended action is motion for approval of the amended administrative contract for Dr. Lisa Tuttle. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Maines, second by Mrs. Zakor. Mr. Maines, any discussion?
No.
Mrs. Zakor.
Wait, number 5. I just want to make sure I understand that first sentence correctly. Here.
So just so I know exactly that we're saying that the administrator has the option to either participate in the
District's health insurance plan.
thank you, that's in conjunction with TCE formula or not,
The 18.5%.
18 and a
Yes.
half, which is aligned with, I believe, TCEA. Okay,
Yes.
and so that's the only option. There's nothing else.
So the union, the certified put in 20%. The HR director is a classified member, so they put in 18.5%
What do you mean?
under the
they?
retirement system.
Oh,
So
no, this is for healthcare
Certified,
premiums.
yeah. So as of the last board meeting, I attached that sheet, which explains the classified staff pay 18.5% of the
Because she's a
total
CERS,
premiums.
because she's a
for-
CERS person.
And then the STRS or the TCEA eligible members can put in 20%. So that would be the only difference.
It's not that they can, they would need
That's
to put,
required.
they're required to put in 20. It's just a CERS is only an 18 and a half.
And is that the modification to the
Never heard
contract from the prior?
That was the, yes, that was the TCA and obviously I
Yeah.
didn't do that correctly.
So when we passed our policy 80-20, we didn't talk about SIRS and STIRS. I don't recall that. And Simon, you were part of that as well. And so I just kind of,
I don't remember that either.
Well, you weren't on the board yet.
Oh,
we
I
did-
thought you meant, oh, yeah.
Yeah, when we changed the
I thought we were
policy
talking
from
about insurance, we
100%.
just added.
Yeah,
My bad.
we changed that to 80-20 for all.
It was the year Mr. Stefanik came, because the first year we changed it, because we had to change his.
Yeah, it went into effect 2021, I believe.
Yeah, is that the year you came, Mr. Brennan?
2020 to 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. That was when we changed it.
So that's why I'm a little just thrown off on this 18, but I don't recall us, and Mr. Stevens was a big part of that, and he's seemed very competent in all of it. I just don't recall SIRS and STIRS.
And this is where payroll brought this contract language up. That it wasn't, it had her with the STIRS piece, not the SIRS piece. Because HR is a SIRS employee.
Okay.
I'll have to look back in the book.
Whereas other administrators may not be as SIRS. Okay, thank you. So it is kind of distinct.
It is,
I
Got
don't think any other administrators are SIRS, they're all.
Okay, well, now that's making more sense.
The HR directors rotate over to SIRS.
Okay.
And we've never had HR before, so we didn't know.
So we didn't
It's a
know.
New position to the
Okay,
district.
thank you very much.
this is facility.
Yeah, new position to the
Facility.
district. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay.
right, that's right, that's right.
Okay.
That's what that.
Yeah, Ms. Hagan and Dr. Tuttle for the two.
And the treasurer.
Well, thank you to whoever caught this in payroll.
Yeah, thank
That was a
you
good
for
catch.
piecing that together.
Yeah, that was a good catch.
It's been over, what,
Anything,
been 2 years since we had the notification about SIRS, so it's 2 years back, so.
Okay.
Mackenzie catching it was.
anything else, Mr. Director?
No, thank you.
Any other board members? Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Maines,
Yes.
Zakor,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Dunaway.
Yes.
Patrick.
Yes, motion passes. Next item is recommend action, motion for approval of the following overnight and out-of-state trips. Power the Pen competition at Ashland University from May 18th through May 19th, 2023. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Maines, seconded by Mrs. Zakor, or Mrs. Drum, or Dunaway. Get that eventually. Mr. Maines, any discussion?
Only that I know Katie Van Oss. I'm very proud of her and I'm glad she's doing this. She's very competent and will do a good job.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Wow, Power of the Pen, they have a long-standing tradition. This is a very successful group at Tipp City Schools, and it's been fun every year. They really hit it out of the park. So way to keep going with that. Best of luck.
No.
Mrs. Drum?
No, thank you.
Good luck and everything goes well. Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Maines,
Yes.
Dunaway,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes,
Zakor.
Yes.
motion passes. Next item is stage crafters. Recommend action is motion for approval of the following staff for stage crafters for 2022 to 2023. Is there a motion?
I motion.
Motion by Mrs. Drum. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Maines. Mrs. Drum, any discussion?
Nope.
I want to add something. We had talked about the putting a cap on the hours. Melanie did some background work as well as Mrs. Support did some background work as well. There isn't anything in the previous past that kind of memorialized how the number of hours that would be capped at. Melanie had talked to the advisor. It was capped at, I think, 100, 110. And the comments from the previous board meeting was between like 110 to 100 to 120. So I would recommend just memorialize it. So it's clear at 110 and just leave it at that. So it's moving forward, it's documented,
Perfect.
if that makes sense to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Mr. Maines, did you say you had anything?
No.
Or any other board members?
Yeah, I do.
All right, Mrs. Dunaway.
So if you look at the final page, it says total hours 125. I'm completely satisfied with the max of da. Do we need to spell it out a little better before we approve this? Because you know what I'm saying? Because right now the motion reads, do you plan to take this?
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
yeah. Because right now the motion reads, motion for approval of the following, blah, blah. You just put in there at 110 hours or something, just make it clear.
Correct.
That way, the next board says,
So
oh,
I
hold on.
move to amend the motion
There you go, perfect. Go ahead.
to read. Motion for approval of the following staff for stagecrafters 2023
For 110 hours.
with a cap for the program director of 110 hours.
Perfect.
Program producer.
Or excuse me, program producer.
I'll second.
101, I'm sorry.
110.
110.
And if that doesn't work, they can always come back to us.
The current motion to amend by Mrs. Zakors would read as follows. Recommend action, motion for approval of the following staff for stagecrafters 2022 to 2023 with a maximum cap of the program
Producer.
producer of 110 hours. Is there a second?
I seconded.
So Mrs. Zakor, seconded by Mrs. Dunaway. Mrs. Zakor, any discussion?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Dunaway, any discussion?
No, thank you to Mr. Moran and
As Ms.
Mrs. Fox and
Fox and
Mrs. Zakor. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Mazer, is there anything?
No.
So my question, I don't know, if Mr. Moran, you and I kind of talked about this a little bit, but I was kind of wondering when you're capping something at 100 and something hours, if the hours that they work exceeds that number, do we have an issue related to failing to compensate for people for hours worked, like versus a stipend or something like that?
And they would just say this is the job and move forward with it.
And as a clarification, she wrote in there, she'll work more than that, but she's totally fine with being paid for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in the addendum.
Yeah, I think we're fine. We're fine with that. We said this is the job. It's for 110 hours. Move forward.
If it pleases anybody, it could be written up. The hourly rate times 110 equals, and that could be listed as the stipend amount. And if the board decides to change the hourly rate at some point, then we just change that.
But I think this is a contracted supplemental position, so we have to go by that position, right? The hourly rate.
Do we know how many weeks?
So if there's.
That's
It's
2 weeks.
It's gonna go up.
Oh, it's been changing over the years, the hourly pay. So
Yeah.
I suggest just keeping it by hours instead of total amount. That'll
I was
change
just going with if you set a supplement amount.
I think that's something.
for this year, but that won't be relevant for next year.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That gets you past the, if she says, I know I'm gonna put in more hourly, but I'm fine with the 110, it gets you away from the hourly thing.
Yeah, I was looking too. Oh, I'm sorry. I know that she was checking today. I think it's out of their fundraising instead of the general fund. So I don't think, and Tyler, you may know, I don't think Stagecrafters is in the TCA agreement.
Mr. Barnes is saying.
Is it?
Don't hold me to this,
That's last.
but I know Mr. Maley, Mr. White, all the other than Ms. Jazinski are out of the fundraiser account. I do know that. I do not know. I thought hers came out of the general fund.
I agree with Mr. Barnes.
I thought it was too.
Please, order, sorry, order, please.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much for the point of clarification, Mr. Barnes. This is coming up in June, right? June 12th, is that right? I mean, I'm apprehensive approving a contract that indicates someone's going to work more hours than they're getting paid on an hourly basis. Without understanding, any FLSA implications or things like that. So, I really, for me to feel comfortable, I really want to have an understanding of that. And my preference would be to have a weekly salary. If that's feasible, depending if it fits the exemption or, you know, some other reason, I don't even know if it applies. So I guess I don't have enough information. I have no issues with the amount. It's the way it's structured that I don't know the answer to. And so I'm just noting that. Any other discussion? All right, Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Excuse me, could you just read it back, please?
Sure.
What's the motion now?
The present motion is motion to approve the following staff for Stagecrafters 2023, subject to a maximum cap of 110 hours for the program producer at an hourly rate of $34.08. Made by Mrs. Zakor and seconded by Mrs. Dunaway. Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Zakor,
Yes.
Dunaway.
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Maines,
Yes.
Patrick.
Abstain. Motion passes. Next time is future board agendas. List future agenda items. Anyone have anything to add or suggest?
Go ahead, Ann.
Go ahead, Mrs. Zakor.
We might down the road put on there our credit card policy, but that's down the road, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We're still working on it.
Yeah, we're still working on it.
So do we want to add it as a list or do you want to come back?
It's a running list.
Is it
right?
part of the policy committee type of thing or?
Well,
It is.
yeah, Yeah, it
the
is.
Policy there.
It is.
Do we want
That was the
to,
policy.
you want to just address it at that time then when you come up with
okay,
the
yeah,
report?
okay, we'll talk about it in
Yeah.
committee and then bring it forth. You're right.
Sounds good. Anyone else?
I would like to add under facilities, we can just do a hashtag levy committee. I think it's time we get serious about talking about a levy committee. Maybe we can do that next work session or something.
Mr. Moran, did you want to weigh in on that at all or?
I've spoken with a couple board members and that's something that definitely need to get on the radar and get some guidance on what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do in order to make sure the district is in compliance. So some information will be going out, getting collected for everybody to assess.
Do's and don'ts kind of list.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion, Mr. Dunaway. I had the same thought and, but I know that with recent changes in interpretation of what we're permitted to do and not permitted to do, I want to have an understanding of that before we kind of move forward. And I asked Mr. Moran if he knew, and he indicated he was going to be looking into that. But I think it's worth having it on there, if anything, just to see, you know, where we stand on getting an answer to that, if that makes sense to people, or what are you thinking, Mrs. Dunaway, because it's your suggestion?
I just gave my suggestion. It's time for us to start talking about getting our levy committee together, actual people, getting names, volunteers, all of that.
I don't disagree with that. I guess I'm not sure what we as a board can actively do to do that legally now. Is the
Well,
issue.
we can reach out to OSPA and get the guidelines. I mean, any of us can do that. I'm sure they have like a running brochure or an ongoing kind of list, that type of thing.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Or is that all you have since Dunaway?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Next item is 7A, upcoming meetings. The next regular board meeting will take place on Monday, May 22nd, 2023 at the Board of Education, beginning at 6 p.m. The next work session meeting will take place on Tuesday, June 6th, 2023 at the Board of Education, beginning at 5 p.m. And is there anything else for go to the order? I entertain a motion to adjourn.
And
Motion by Mrs. Drum, and is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mrs. Zakor. Any discussion? Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Drum,
yes.
Zakor.
Yes.
Dunaway.
Yes.
Maines,
Yes.
Patrick.
Yes. Motion passes. We are adjourned. The time is 8:24 p.m. Thank you.
Let's return those back together.
Yeah.